When I try to explain OPAS to people that aren't already part of the converted, the question either explicitly or implicitly is, why so much emphasis on pre-engineering? And part of it is where I come from. I'm partly responsible for trying to increase the number of engineers we graduate. So we're trying to give young people an insight as to why they should at least consider engineering as a career. And of course, I mean to include things like computer science and material science under that same heading. But it really goes well beyond that to the vast majority of kids who are not destined to become engineers. There are way too many kids who don't get science and math for its own sake. It's just some reason why they don't. But engineering is this huge opportunity for them to understand that math and science are what makes everything work through engineering. So if we can give them some exposure to engineering in K-12 and on into college, they will study harder in math and science, or at least have a reason to consider doing so. Another is that most people, I think certainly old people like me, and I'm told young people, need concrete examples to really understand things. And engineering provides concrete examples, hands-on experiences that can add to the depth of experience, depth of understanding and retention. There's way too much data that indicates that people that pass tests forget almost everything on the test within a week or a month of taking it. But by getting hands-on, there's a much greater chance that you'll remember because you understood it more deeply in the first place. Finally, and something that I think many of you heard the Vice President of the Boston Museum of Science talk about is that all citizens in the 21st century need to understand something about technology because we live in a technical society. Nearly all public policy questions have a technical component to them. And so technical literacy is important for all our children and all our adults. So what do we do about it? Well, that's not the subject of today's meeting, but I'll give you Bruce's hints. One is we can add engineering and applied science to existing math and science courses. Another is we can increase the number of variety and access to electives that are pre-engineering in nature throughout the grades, particularly high school juniors and seniors. And three is we can grow our excellent co-curricular programs that Oregon's fortunate to have so they can reach many more young people. Now, going back to the top, why do we need more engineers? Probably preaching to the converted here, but it's surprising how many people don't realize that every industry in Oregon uses engineers and computer scientists and information technologists and you name it. And I could give you the list, but I think you probably could create the list for me. Here's something that is a work in progress. Those of you who were at the summit, we had a one-page vision statement that we shared, and I think it had a lot of great content. But any of you that saw it probably said, they're never going to be able to explain this to anybody that doesn't spend 2 days at a summit. So we've been working on that, and we're close to having a one-sentence vision statement. It will change some over the next few weeks, but the current draft is all Oregonians have the opportunity to choose and successfully pursue engineering or applied science as their field of study and career, thereby helping Oregon's industries innovate and prosper in the global economy. That doesn't cover everything in our vision, but I think it covers some important things, and everything else goes into the lofty goals statement, which you'll see shortly, but not today. Those of you at the summit know that the 5 themes of OPAS are motivating young people, preparing them to go on, making sure that they can easily transfer from one level, and enhancing our ability to retain them in the programs that will help them move forward in their careers. And across the board in all these areas, we have a lot of work to do in increasing the diversity in both gender, ethnicity, and economic background. When I talk to people outside of OPAS and they want to know, okay, what are your recommendations? I say, well, they're work in progress. We'll get back to the specifics, but we think we'll have recommendations in the area of standards, curricula, assessment, professional development, marketing and outreach, collaboration between levels and various constituents that are there to help create the solution, and further development of pathways that help guide young people and old to careers through various educational opportunities. That's my remarks. I think I'm going to put Terry Bristol on the spot now and introduce this afternoon's speaker. Thank you very much for coming, and let's keep in touch.
So I'm going to, they talk about abusing an audience that can't get away. So as it happens, one of the reasons that I invited Dr. Bucciarelli to be part of the Science Technology Society series was because I believed a lot in what he was saying, and it's some themes that I've been working on for some considerable period of time too, about engineering and science and society and values. And so I was just reminding myself that I'm a product of the Portland schools, went to Cleveland High School and so forth, and I escaped to California and went to Berkeley, and I went down there to go into astronomy, and then I found that I felt I was being too narrowed, which I think is one of the problems we're dealing with. And so I ended up finding philosophy of science and history of philosophy of science. Went to London. Those of you who know Thomas Kuhn's work, Structure of Scientific Revolutions, it was like we're all rethinking what science is, what its place is in society, who we are in the universe. And then I came back to Oregon. I was teaching at Portland State for a while, and I thought, boy, the revolution has happened. And I went back and I started working with the schools, and I went, oh my God, nothing has changed. And getting the sense that, that when I came out of, that all the really interesting, important questions were in science were way, way out there, and I didn't really, after I got my PhD, and I would then work under a principal investigator for 5 or 10 years, and then maybe somewhere in my late 30s or 40s, I might be able to ask a question, and these are sort of stereotypical things, but they're the fact that a lot of this just hadn't changed, even though the thinking had changed on it was very striking to me. And then I, started to grow up and realize the momentum of systems and how difficult it is to change them. Anyway, at that time, I actually wrote an editorial in the Oregonian. And I thought about it for a while because I figured I have 1,000 words. What can I say? And I wrote this thing, and basically, in a few words, what I said was, if I can point at one thing, it's the lack of engineering curriculum in K-12. Because engineering embodies values in what it's doing is solving problems that are real-world problems, and they're in reality, has a reality aspect to it. It has values, it connects to society, it connects to things we care about. Science has this detached sort of like, oh, here we are, found ourselves in this universe, let's figure out how it works, It's sort of, again, those are impressions, but they're problematic in the way that we develop our curriculum. Anyway, so that's coming back on. The other thing I want to push you guys, because I realize here it is after 25 years after my editorial, something finally happening here. And what Bruce is doing and the Chancellor and everybody I think it's a great effort that's going on here, but I want to tell you how great it is and that the responsibility and the opportunity you have. There's two aspects. One is very simply is that there's an old metaphor that generals always fight the last war. And as we're having this problem of what's happening in engineering education and so forth, the danger that I want to warn you from is not solving the problem with the old tools and the old way of thinking. Because if we simply push more of the same stuff and higher rigor and more of this and so forth, if the images, if the reason the kids are walking away from this stuff or not attracted to it is not because they're not getting enough rigor or enough exposure, then all you're going to do is exacerbate the problem by pressing more of the things that are driving them away from it. And to that end, I want to encourage you very strongly to think outside the box about what is engineering and how does it fit into the educational curriculum and so forth. And to that end, Dr. Bucciarelli and I are just talking about various programs around. He's going to tell you about some things that he's been involved in down the line here. But I had come across this article, which I peppered the whole place with, this guy Steve Goldman, and it's a really nice summary of the relationship between science and engineering and education in a big place. So I really want to encourage you to read it. It's a little bit deep. It's got a lot of references that don't matter, but the message that he's going after, the things he's pushing, I think are really, really important, and that's what's going to attract people. So I dumped that article on you, and it's something that Dr. Bucciarelli gave it to him a couple days ago. He's going to contact Goldman, and he's going to work with them. So this is important stuff, and it's a very, very nice summary of, I think, a pretty clear and visionary thought about what engineering is and how it fits in and what the problems have been in the past about misrepresenting science, really. And the last thing I want to say is there's this, this lecture series that we do, also do a few with Mentor Graphics down in San Jose, and I work down there. And in San Jose, there's a thing called the Tech Museum, which you guys may be familiar with. It's kind of their version of OMSI, called the Technology because it's Silicon Valley. But and also with Santa Clara University has the Center for Science, Technology, and Society, and they kind of co-do this thing. It's called the Tech Museum Awards, and I put some of those on the table if you guys can look at them. They're for taking if you do. And I was just down there the other day, and I said, give me some of these because I want to throw these at the OPAS people. If you want to attract kids to engineering, talk to them about technology for humanity. You know, if you want to talk to them, it's like, hey, I'm going to train you to be the top-notch, you know, guy who's going to be writing code in the cubicle out at Intel. I mean, you know, that's okay. But the thing that's motivating them is, I mean, to give words, like one guy went out and developed a water purification system. It costs $10,000. Serves village, or sorry, it costs $2,500. Serves a village of 10,000 people, solar powered. I mean, this is a major problem around the world. So there gets a word for that. That's the sort of stuff that kind of like, hey, you know, engineers can do that. Hey. So anyway, there's a whole bunch of these. They've been doing this for 4 or 5 years. I would really like OMSI to do it too. I've sort of thrown it at them, but I didn't see anybody pick it up. But if anybody else has influence with those guys, it also sends a message to kids about what technology is about and what the place of the engineer is in the world, which I think is one of the big images that we can convey. It's not just a lot of the neat high-tech stuff is there, but engineering is much broader and has much greater scope to it, as I'm sure you all know. So anyways, that's the other thing to abuse you with there. The last thing, any of you who don't have tickets, Dr. Bucciarelli, besides this, we go up to Portland State and do a kind of a pre-function for about 120 high school students in a couple of hours. And he and Ethan Seltzer, who's in the urban design program up there, we're going to convince these kids that they should go to Portland State and major in engineering and design. And then tonight he was speaking at the Schnitz at 7 o'clock. And if you don't have tickets, I have some tickets here, so just say the word or ask Bruce for them, and we can get some to them. Okay, so enough of me. When Bruce and I were talking about this, and I became aware of OPAS in more detail, I also then was going, as it coming up to Dr. Bucciarelli's visit, and I got to talking to him and about what OPAS was, and said, gee, there might be a connection here, and he told me that he's very much involved in this. This is an issue that he's been working on for years, and he's been, I think, at MIT a leader in pushing for a sense of engineering being, in fact, perhaps more fundamental than science. That science is sort of derivative out of engineering and representing it. Now, it's not like that. We should turn the tables, and it's not that engineering is the handmaiden of science. It's in fact science is the handmaiden of engineering, and engineering is the more primary discipline. Anyway, he's been working on this in Denmark. There's some really cool programs going on there, and other places that we're not alone. But you guys are in a key place, a key opportunity to really think deeply about this stuff and to, again, do best practice, find out what other people are doing. This is what Dr. Bucciarelli is going to tell you a little bit about, and think outside the box, be visionaries. You have a great opportunity to do something very cool here. So that's my pitch. So, Louis Bucciarelli, Dr. Larry Bucciarelli, he's been a professor of technology studies at MIT for numerous years. He's now emeritus, although he double dips. He gets to teach some too still. He's got 2 great books out, which we have out there. I really recommend both of them as being reality checks on what engineering is really about, what the design process is about. It's very deep, very good. I just particularly love the engineering philosophy book and really understanding how engineers talk to each other. And I was talking to Ron Adams, just one little quick anecdote about what Dr. Bucciarelli is saying, and about the fact that electrical engineers look at the world in one way and mechanical engineers look at the world in another way. They have different languages, they have different object worlds. And Dr. Bucciarelli's saying, and he started talking to me about all these, when he used Tektronix, he said, oh, geez, that's exactly what was happening to us. And he said, we'd have the electronic part of this thing we're putting together, and we had the mechanical part of the thing put together. And these guys couldn't talk to each other. They didn't know how to work. So there were 2 or 3 people that had both mechanical engineering degrees and electrical engineering degrees, and those are the ones that helped us interface between, to actually put these things together. So understanding how the interface and the communication aspect and multidisciplinarity of engineering is fundamental and cool, and he's been working on it. Anyway, great stuff. Hope you read his books. And I've talked too long, so here's Dr. Bucciarelli, Professor of Technology Studies at MIT. I'm sure that mic's good.
Beautiful day. It's a little wet back in New England. One correction to the introduction. I'm a professor of engineering and technology studies. I want to be clear that my background is, my formal education is all in engineering, with a bachelor's and a master's from Cornell, mechanical and aerospace, and a doctorate at MIT in aerospace. But I've always been doing things I shouldn't be doing. And finally, I'm a rock star. My kid in there. My wife is with me, and I've gone up 10 points just by walking down the street. Why I would not want my daughter to major in engineering? It's with some trepidation I talk about women in engineering. Why they don't study computer science, for example. Let me just say I don't believe in genes as determining, defining, or explaining the difference in enrollments and their relative success in science or engineering. In my mind, it's all social mores, norms, tradition, glass ceilings, and for the students of the middle school, peer pressure. And that matters is defining for boys as well as girls. But my talk is not really about women in science and engineering. I'm just using this as a foil. I mean, Terry just wanted a sexy title. That was another reason. In fact, I would not want my son to major in engineering as matters now stand. What I will talk about is, first, a bit about what engineering is about, what engineers do. If you want to find out more about that subject that I'm going to say right now, you'll have to read my book and come to the lecture tonight. And then I'm going to talk about what engineering education is about from my perspective, and how it's deficient, how there's a disjunction there between engineering practice and engineering education. And of course the aim is, well, what could be done about it? And that's where you come in. So I hope these reflections bear on your thinking about pre-engineering programs for youth, both boys and girls. Tonight I'm going to say, and now I'm going to talk about design, engineering design. But I want to make matters clear here. Design to some people, particularly Northern Italians, is all about making things look good, you know, fashionable. That's not all there is to design. That's a good bit of it, perhaps, the aesthetic. And the aesthetic will include other senses other than the visual, the feel for something. But design to me is a more engaging activity. That is, it engages more of one's experience, more of one's education than just how things look. Design is about how things work. So I talk about design broadly conceived. Now I have two handouts, and one, I think you have this. I'm going to use this as a way to talk about design. Well, I claim that design is a social process. Now you have to recognize that where I'm coming from. I'm an engineering faculty member, have been for 35 years. I have taught some design, but most of my teaching is in the engineering sciences, the so-called mechanics. I've taught structural dynamics, structural stability at the graduate level. I now teach entering students in sophomore level engineering mechanics. So I teach the hard stuff, the hardcore stuff. Right? That's where I'm coming from. So that's the community. My community is a community of faculty that teach design, many of whom would like to make design into a science. Many who write publications to be published so that they'll not perish. But, so when I say design is a social process, I'm trying to put that right out front, right in their face. Look, there's something more to engineering than science, than publications, than logic, than, as Goldman says, a logic of necessity. Design is a more engineering, not just design. I mean, design is a social process. I was in co-PI for one of these NSF coalitions, XL. It was one of the first coalitions to try to renovate undergraduate engineering and to attract more women and minorities into engineering. The University of Washington was one of our members, along with Howard University, CCNY, Penn State, MIT, Morgan State. Is that 7? Probably not. But anyway, it was a large coalition, a lot of money, and we wanted to renovate undergraduate engineering by infusing design broadly conceived throughout the curriculum, throughout all the programs, not just in the freshman year design course. That was very effective. That was a real target of opportunity, but also the engineering science courses throughout. And that was quite a challenge. We didn't really succeed in all of that. We did have some success, but I think we'll talk about some of those reasons as we go along here. But that was my objective, was to contrast. You see, when we say about infusing design into the curriculum, really what I thought about, and really what we're trying to do is infuse engineering into the engineering curriculum. It seemed to me that, you know, I've done these studies of engineers at work, and I've done a good bit of engineering myself, consulting, and some applied research programs. And it seemed to me that design shouldn't be the weak sister in an engineering curriculum, just left to a capstone course in the senior year. It should be the core of it. And design broadly conceived, not design as a science, trying to replicate what they do in mechanics, which I teach. So, here's an example. Here's my, let's say, theory of design as a social process. It goes as follows. I distinguish in between two different worlds, two different modes of work of an engineer. One mode is what I call object world work. Terry referred to that. And that is what we focus on in our education. That's the science-based stuff. Like, I'm a structural engineer. So when I go to work on a project, let's say design of an aircraft or design of a support structure for a photovoltaic array, that's my responsibility, is the support structure for the photovoltaic array. Okay. That's my object world work. And I have all the tools available I need. I have all the science, all the mathematics, all the computer algorithms. I have all the suppliers that I know who they are. I know all of the discrete sizes of all the structural members. I know all about materials. That's my object world. The people on the electrical side who are concerned with designing the networking of the module, you know, how big should the cells be? How are they interconnected? Where do we put the junction box? How thick? All of these are somebody else's concern, another person's concern. They're part of the team. We're designing this new photovoltaic module. Right? I'm doing the structure, they're doing the electronics. Can we design independently? Well, you try to break up the design task into independent efforts so that people can pursue them independently within their own world. But let me tell you, it can't be done. It can't be done. You can never set interfaces clear enough, interface requirements clear enough, so that you can have people work independently, so neatly, so cleanly, within their own world. So what happens is that people, usually when that happens with my students, I do a little dance. I think I'm crazy. So you can't work independently. You have to, no matter how much you try, because design is, after all, it's not designed if you could do that. It's only designed because it's open, because you don't know really how to define those interfaces so detailed a way that you could successfully separate out the task. You never know when someone's going to be creative in the structural realm and suggest something that interferes with what the electronics person is going to require. So you see, you get the point. I can study electronics, I can study structures. When I go to work, I got to know how to speak another language, another more common, ordinary language. So design is this process where you have different individuals with different interests, technical interests, responsibilities, competencies, and working within different so-called object worlds. But that's not sufficient. No matter how expert they are in their own domain, they've got to be able to, one, articulate what they're doing to someone else in a more common language, and they've got to be open to change and negotiation. That makes designing a social process. That's the theme of the book. Here's a little example of that. This is a design exercise that I worked up with colleagues at MIT. Actually, there was a design seminar by Don Schoen, Urban Studies there. It was very provocative and interesting. Don Schoen passed away several years ago. This is a design negotiation game. If you look at the lower left quadrant here, you see there are little red and blue triangles. Well, they're free. They move around freely. And if you look at that grid, it's a non-orthogonal grid. You know, the lines intersect. This is the design within a two-dimensional world. It's a design exercise meant to be used in a sort of a design lab over a period of 3 hours. Right? There are 4 participants in this design exercise. It's a structural, well, first of all, the design task. They're designing a residence for the inhabitants of this two-dimensional world, the delta world. It's a two-dimensional world. There's an in-plane gravitational force. You notice the pencil there? The structural engineer has put down the direction, has laid the pencil down in the direction of the gravitational force, and he, I guess, is trying to put that on an axis of symmetry so that the structural engineer can balance the loads on the 2 support points. If you're a structural engineer, the structural engineer has a simply supported beam problem here. And he's also got to ensure that the internal moment, any one of the intersection of these triangles, is not excessive. There's real technical hard object world content here. These little red and blue triangles. So that's the structural engineer. Another participant is the thermal engineer. This is a residence. The little red triangles are heat sources, like little nuclear reactors. They conduct to the blue, they all conduct. The blue are passive, but they conduct. The conduction is determined by the length of the overlap. Where does this heat go? Well, it radiates to outer space. If the triangle has an outward pointing node, how much does it radiate to outer space? Depends upon the amount of, that's free out there around the outward pointing node. Yeah? So there's a heat transfer problem. It's a heat transfer problem. That's the thermal engineer's responsibilities. What are the specs on the thermal engineer? The average temperature has to be within certain limits. And the temperature of any one can't be greater than a certain amount or less than a certain amount. In other words, what you see it's a heat transfer problem. If you have a cluster of red ones, it's going to get real hot there. And I say they melt. They don't really melt, of course. But in engineering, we don't have the real thing in front of us when we design, right? We got things like this, triangles, computer models, and we take them seriously. And these people take it seriously. Okay, the project manager, what is his concerns? Well, the red ones, he's concerned with cost, time to schedule. The red ones cost a certain amount. Blue ones cost a different amount. If you buy more than 16 of the red ones, like an Intel device, you get a price drop. Blue ones, same way. The glue that holds them together, there's no real glue. The glue that holds them together costs money. Red-blue glue is very expensive because they're hot and cold, right? Blue is not so expensive. Red is more expensive. And that, of course, depends upon the amount of glue you need, which depends upon the overlap. There's also another more subtle thing which isn't evident, and that's there's a sub-module here defined by sort of the topography of the thing, which only the project manager really sees. The architect is concerned with the aesthetics, of course. The people, I say in the instructions for the roles, these people like a lot of nooks and crannies. on the inside, right? And by the way, you architects, don't believe that crap, the numerical numbers of those engineers. They don't know what they're talking about. You know what your customer wants. So, it's why is it non-orthogonal? Because I try to make a different from, this is for students, let's say engineering students who maybe, actually this group were graduate students in a program at Danish Technical University in nano manufacturing or something, where they were forming groups, and the guy wanted to have some exercise which would get the students to learn something about group teamwork in an engineering context. And he had seen, actually he's from France, the game had been used in Grenoble, so he brought it up with him. And I happened to be there at the time. He found that I was there, and these are his slides. So, 4 different roles, 4 different object worlds. Each one looks at this evolving design, and it's easily changed because these triangles move around easily, and they're all seeing something different. One object, multiple object worlds. And you'll see, at one time you'll see everyone pointing and counting, and they're all counting something different. It's made different. The roles are, you train them in the roles, and then let them go at it, and then you have them evaluate their design. And that can be done in various ways. It's quite open. I mean, I usually, people have done things with this game that I didn't imagine. First of all, it's open in interpretation of the roles. Usually there's a little role document, a few pages that gives them their science, their basic science. And they learn that, and you try to train them in that. But once you see them playing, what you begin to see is that they elaborate on these roles. And you say, where did that person get that argument from? You know, that's not in my role description. Those are the good engineers. I mean, as long as within reason, rational. So they design, they negotiate, and it's, of course, the specifications are set so there's overlap. So you can't, the interfaces obviously are not clean here, and the specs overlap, requirements overlap. And then you try to get them to talk about process. Usually what happens is, when you have a group, maybe 4 groups playing, they'll critique each other's designs, and it's very difficult to get them to stop talking about how well they designed the damn thing, and to talk about the process. But that's the purpose, is to talk about the process. That design is a social process. How rational was your process in negotiating? How did you convince that other person? How do you explain to that other person? All right, so that's my vision of design. That's my vision of engineering practice. What's engineering education about? Well, this might appear a bit of a strawman, but I don't think it's too far off. First of all, it's very authoritarian. For the most part, it's very authoritarian. The classroom's a very authoritarian place. You teach them the mechanics, you teach them Newton's laws of static equilibrium. You don't have a student raising his hand and saying, I don't believe that crap. You cannot challenge Newton. Well, at least not as a sophomore. So it's very authoritarian in science and mathematics. Even in the engineering science courses, that pattern is pretty much there. Now, what I've tried to do, just by the side, is to introduce open-ended exercises into the engineering science courses. And I gave an example of that at the Central Catholic High School yesterday, I think. And so I think there are ways to open things up. But of course there, when you start doing things differently, right? What's engineering education? Knowledge is some kind of material stuff. This I talk about. I think you distributed my 5th chapter in my book. Yeah. Well, yeah. Where you go to a curriculum discussion meeting and knowledge is some kind of stuff, right? You got to cover all of this stuff. And if you leave that stuff out, what do you put in? Right? Knowledge isn't that kind of stuff. What is knowledge? I mean, there's information, right? And this is the way I break it down. There's information, and information is stuff. Information is bits, information is text, pictures, right? What is knowledge? Well, knowledge is, I might, nothing. It's knowing that matters. Knowing what you do with that information. Knowing how to read it and give it a correct reading. Not necessarily unique correct reading, but some kind of reading that's more or less in line with what the author intended, and which is useful in education. I think also, I don't know how to deal with this, but one of the things that bothers me about the attempts to sell engineering is so much hype, emphasis upon getting the robot to work right in the competition. And I think that's okay, and because that is, that engineers do get a lot of pleasure and joy, reward from getting things to work right. There's nothing like, really seeing your baby go out the door. We anthropomorphize a lot too, and having it work right. I mean, there is that, but the context is a bit inauthentic. I mean, you don't build something to compete. Well, I guess in the military you do, but so those are some characteristics, I think, of engineering education. Authoritarian, science-based, can't really challenge it, and a bit of too much of a focus on the excitement of and rewards of building something that works. Now, I don't want to denigrate that too much. I just say that that's not sufficient. That doesn't fill the picture in my mind. In the way I talk about object-oriented work and what engineers do is that object-oriented work is necessary to engineering practice. You cannot do design. You cannot build things, make things, design things well, unless you know the science, unless you do the object-oriented work. But it's necessary, but it's not sufficient. Yeah. And no mathematician's going to get along very well with just the necessary conditions. Some other characteristics about engineering education, it's pretty much about individual effort in competition with one's peers. I mean, for most of the curriculum, students take tests as individuals, okay, in competition with their peers. It even gets so bad. I've heard faculty in the past, this is back in the Stone Ages when I was younger, where they would talk about, plotting a distribution of the students' grades, maybe 200 students in the course. And they wouldn't feel right about the course unless the last, tail, they didn't flunk those people on the left side of the tail, Sort of like, that's the way it is. I mean, I don't know. It seems to me that metaphor, sort of quality control and production, seems to me when you have a problem with quality control and production and you've got some failure of parts, what you do is you look at the machinery of production. Okay, so it's all about individual effort and competition with peers for the most part. Now there's a lot of good ideas about project-based learning out there, abroad as well as here. There are freshman design courses. There are a lot of sort of extracurricular kind of activities of racing cars and a lot of good things going on, but they're not at the core. They don't drive the system. I'm talking about things that drive the system, characteristics of the system as it is driven. It's all about assigned exercises, problems that have a single answer, generally. Again, there's a capstone design course also, so away from that. But for the most part, it's assigned problems that have a single answer. And these assigned problems are the strangest looking things sometimes. The worldly context has been abstracted out completely. I gave an example of one yesterday about an individual pulling a roller, and it was the barest minimal thing, a roller and a stick figure of an individual pulling a roller over a bump, and the question is, what's the force the person has to pull? And you get an answer, 2,000 pounds. Fine. Whoever heard of someone pulling with 2,000 pounds, but it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. That's not what you're teaching in mechanics. How can they draw a free body diagram? Can they draw a vector diagram? Can they calculate the right number? If I make a mistake and made the roller too big, doesn't matter. Nor does it matter if they had to roll 1 acre in the day. Yeah. Or whether it was a man or a woman that was pulling the roller. It was irrelevant. Laughed out of the room. Is that a man or a woman? In engineering, if you're designing a new roller, right? Well, who's going to pull this roller? A man or a woman? That's a good question. So the worldly context, that's all been filtered out. That's the sort of thing you can infuse back into these engineering science courses. It's also deductive, neat, clean, and specialized. Different worlds. Different object worlds within the curriculum. That's one of the questions. How do we do all this stuff? How do we teach all this stuff? What I went through was a 5-year curriculum at Cornell where they tried to teach me all this stuff a mechanical engineer could possibly need to know. What happened? But that was before computers, barely after TV. And, with computers, of course, they're crazy today, right? Things are crazy today. You can go nano or bio or plantable or, what are you going to do? Try to cover all that stuff? Now I have a biology requirement as an institute requirement at MIT. Is that what we need to do? More stuff? And then people are clamoring for ethics. Now you got to take philosophy seriously. You got to send them over to the philosophy department. Communication. Got to communicate. Send them over to the writing department. Change anything we're doing? No, that's the fundamental stuff. Can't change that. So I say we have a problem. Turn over, and here's an interesting program at the Danish Technical University, which I was there for a couple of months this last semester, evaluating their invitation. And now, there's several things to note. First of all, the European system generally is different from the United States system. They have something called the Bologna Accords. They're trying to get their act together in education. Very interesting, very constructive kind of atmosphere in Europe, no matter what you read about. Well, they just passed their budget yesterday, I guess. About all the problems they're having with their constitution, things like that. Still a very constructive enterprise compared to what's going on in this country. Did you get that? Right. But they have something called the Bologna Accords, where and they're trying to make some kind of common ground. Institute English is the language. English programs and master's level in science and engineering, so that students can move freely from one country to another. But the one thing that relates here is that generally their undergraduate program in engineering is 3 years. So you'll notice that this is 6 semesters. This is their bachelor program. Then they'll have a 2-year master's program. Now that's not uncommon here in the United States, but at MIT, for example, 4 years undergraduate, 1-year master's. That's but it's more 3-2. Of course, another thing that's different is I think the students that come into engineering schools are I don't know whether they're more firmly tracked. Certainly they are in France, but in Denmark they have a pre-college year, year where they do a lot of the math that we give them in their freshman year here. Of course, many of our students, of course, come in with advanced placement because of the efforts of you people, and they come in and they're able to jump ahead. So, but anyway, that's sort of the structure. But let me just say a few things. Discount the text. The text is not really right on very much. But the main thing to note is the white sections on the left. Each semester, each one of these, like one is the fall semester that students enter. And they do this user-oriented design. What is that? Well, it's a design project where and it might be something like, generally it's related to the city of Copenhagen. Go down we'll give you this task. It could be something like collapsible shopping cart, like over in the gardens over here, yesterday, that was day before yesterday, nice little farmer's market, people put up carts. Well, they say, we want you to design a collapsible cart, all right, for these people that are putting on these farmer markets. What do they have them do? It's user-oriented design. So what they do is they have go downtown, talk to those people, all right? So right away, get out of the classroom, downtown. There's a visual communication course, which is a CAD-like course. But I want to point out another one of the strong elements here. This use and design of products, and most of the yellow ones, those are STS courses. Those are courses where the students are reading Bruno Latour. You ever heard of Bruno Latour? Okay, well, they're talking about social study of science and technology. They're talking about actor network theory there, about how you have many, many stakeholders in the design. It's not just, you know, the firm. It's, you got to think of your users. You got to think of all the stakeholders and how they're going to react to what you're designing. And they're doing this from a theoretical perspective. So it's humanities. It's got some history in it. It's got some sociology in it, a bit of anthropology in it. But it's related directly to their engineering tasks. And they co-teach. They come into the design classroom. The STS teachers, who generally have an undergraduate engineering degree, but a PhD in sociology or anthropology or something like that, come into the engineering class. They help direct the projects. The teams are 5 students. There's also, you see the red courses are more traditional engineering science courses. Those courses are different from the norm in that their content has been shaped to relate to, in some way, the design. Now, that's the hard part, and I was there to try to offer suggestions on how to help out for that. But they have taken liberty, and there's some problems there. Problems in faculty coherence, faculty continuity from year to year. You get one course, the thermodynamics course there was a well-designed course, a lot of student involvement. They focused on an artifact, a refrigerator, had the students taking it apart. You know, all of this is, you know, active learning. Yeah, right, these students are doing that all the time. Take it apart, then you use, what do you need to know to understand how this refrigerator? Well, then you go to the textbook and develop the science, just-in-time kind of learning. But that faculty member, they replaced that faculty member, or the faculty member had an opportunity elsewhere or something. And the course changed dramatically, went back to the traditional, you know, and that's a problem. But anyway, the point is that here's a program that is a radical innovation in the sense that design and STS are the main theme. The engineering science, you know, there's no math and physics here, right? Oh, there is, actually, linear and differential calculus. That's a math taught by a math course, but even there, the math is shaped with projects and open-ended exercise, things like that. And there's a fields and fluid mechanics, which is pretty much math, signals and transformations. So there's, the yellow is the STS for the most part, white is the design, engineering science. So there's I think, a dramatic change in program. 40% of the students are women. Okay. 40% of the students are women. 50% of the students would not have come into engineering, into DTU, into this program, unless, if it were not for this program. Now, what did they want to do? Well, some of them wanted to do architecture, but they found the architecture too fluffy, you know, too much like how you talk about wine tasting, right? You know? that was too. They wanted to do something. They wanted to build things. They wanted to help humanity. They wanted, you know, there are a lot of projects here that are very much in line with this STS program at Santa Clara. There is a real, I think, drive in many engineering students to do good. Let's just say it like that. They want to make something. They want to make money too, but they want to make it good. So 50% were not approved. Some wanted to be architecture. Some wanted to be more traditional design kind of things. You know, and this is no soft program. Others had been out in another engineering program, came back over here, heard about it for some different reasons. They have 120 applicants for 60 slots. They're the booming thing at DTU. And you have to remember one of the things that's different about their universities. The departments get rewarded based upon the number of students in their classes. So that's very important. So they can't get rid of this program. Well, at least they can make it hard for the people because it's interdisciplinary. There's one senior engineering faculty there in mechanical engineering that's been a driver. I mean, there's some key people here. These things don't happen without key people that are really committed. Well, they got to face up to that in your work. Okay. So I would send my daughter to this program. She majored in literature at Oberlin. She married a Greek mathematician. So now she has two beautiful daughters. She writes. She writes for the Atlantic Constitution in the religious section. All right, so what's the relevance of all of this to pre-engineering? Well, it's not going to solve any of your problems. What I've said is mostly descriptive. I can see the problems you face. I've had some contact with attempts to deal with pre-engineering programs, K through 12. That was part of our Excel effort. There were some people at MIT that were very committed. And in fact, MIT now has a teacher education program. I'm part of setting that up, where students that are majoring in science or engineering can minor in education, and there is one faculty member. I think he did get tenure. He was in urban studies. That was my idea, to put him in urban studies. Where are you going to put a faculty member in education? You know, the School of Engineering, the School of Science? You know, let's give him a chance. So we put him in urban studies. You know what? That seemed to make a lot of sense. And I think MIT graduates more physics teachers than any other school of education in the state of Massachusetts. We graduate 4. I think there's one qualified physics teacher in all of Boston. Now, I don't know. That's the kind of anecdote you hear. But, so what do we do? Well, you're in a bind, right? You know, I've said some. You know, I've shown you my dreams about what an engineering education might be like, how it might be changed. But here you're trying to do pre-engineering when the students go from you, and I know there are a lot of innovative things going on in K through 12 in terms of project work and field work, despite all the emphasis upon testing. That's another characteristic of engineering education, is sort of this corporate mentality. You know, you look at you treat students as sort of members of, they come into a box and they go out of the box, sort of very behaviors thing. I think that's the mentality that pervades in a lot of things in this country, particularly in education. You don't open the box to look at the people or their needs or, you know, where they're coming from. You just say, come out of the box. Did they make it or not? Do something. Here's some money. Change what's in the box. Well, that's one, I'm sure that's one barrier you face, and all teachers face, I think. You're trying to do something creative and innovative. So here you are doing innovative things, and yeah, engineering schools stay the same. Well, I think things are going to change. I think there's evidence things are changing. Now, what can you do in pre-engineering? I'm going to stop because I want to open it up for questions, discussion. But I do think one of the things that relates to the robotics thrust, sort of the height thrust, is that maybe we need a little more scholarly attention to what I would like to say is meta-engineering. What is it that's really fundamental to the engineering work processes? Well, science is certainly, as I say, a complement. But it does have this social component, and this game is my attempt to deal with the meta, right? To deal with something, to raise things to a little different level, and not just talk about I teach a lab course in mechanics, and one of the first experiments I do the first week, because you can't do much with students the first week, right? I take it's a structural mechanics course, a little structural mechanics lab. I take the students down, give them some spaghetti, uncooked, and they put it down on a piece of graph paper, and they press the ends, and it bows out, of course, and very slow. And then all of a sudden it breaks, okay? Well, that's breaking due to this excessive stress, usually at the middle, because that's where the radius curvature is minimum. There's a whole theory about this, Euler, 18th century, nonlinear theory. You know, I give them the results of that so they can work with it. Why do I give them spaghetti? Well, it's an easy experiment to do, but it's also, you have a lot of specimens and it's cheap. So you can introduce them to the concept of uncertainty. experimental error. Very simple. I'm sure there are people out that do things like that. But that's kind of meta level, I think, or what's fundamental there? The concept of uncertainty of experimental measurement. You don't have to have a canned experiment, with the real thing, the real motor or something. Get at the, it's hands-on. It's still stuff. There's certainly a relationship of theory to hardware there. I'm a mechanical engineer. Electronics, I'm sure the same thing applies. That there's much you can do with the cost of elements there. The real elements are so minimal, thanks to Intel and others. But anyway, what I'm trying to get at is well, anyway, let's open it up for discussion. That's enough. But it's very much the same idea. Well, they draw it as two circles, engineering and STS, with a significant overlap. And they have a lot of project work each semester. I think there are others too, like Worcester has some, Clyde Dim down at Harvey Mudd. Yeah. There are these design center things. There's a new college up by Boston, begins with Olin, yeah, But if you look carefully, they haven't, I think the major driving force is still traditional in these programs. And there's a good bit of add-on to these programs. But there are other programs. I haven't done them. I tried looking. But nothing is so dramatic. But there are some.
Can I just add one thing there that I won't name the conspirators, but some people talking at Poland State. This discussion has gone on for a long time. And the idea of, I'm a engineering guys here, but to say that to try to change the engineering program themselves, there's so much momentum and money and all sorts of stuff behind it, it's extremely difficult. So the conspirators are talking about actually creating a new degree, not a new department, but a new degree which would actually capture this sort of stuff. And they have the engineering courses, but also have all the other sort of whether that anyone can pull that off.
There's one of the characteristics of this DTU program that I didn't mention, which I should mention, is that first of all, the curriculum is pretty lockstep, as you see, so that runs in the face of those that believe that students should have freedom to choose. I'm not so sure at the undergraduate level whether that's, first of all, whether they really do get that much choice, whether that's necessary. I would say that students must have some object world experience, some in one world, I guess. But they don't have to, not all of these. I don't think that's necessary at the undergraduate level. Maybe the first degree should be a master's degree where the students specialize. People have argued that. But one of the things about this program, lockstep as it is, there's a benefit to that. There are 60 students, they're all together. And they form a community. And there's certain advantages to that. They form a community. Furthermore, because of the open nature of the curriculum in the design course, it's open. So it's a continual discussion, dialogue, and challenge. How do we set the problem? Well, go out and find out. It's give and take. It's no longer passive authoritarian. So these students are brash. They may go off and take another course, and the faculty find them too demanding. They ask too many questions. So those two aspects, community aspect and the sort of the spirit is still there. They haven't been beaten down. Yeah.
One of the things we're struggling with is where to put our emphasis in curriculum change or other changes. And if we had unlimited resources, we could have marketing and outreach programs that motivate kids to take AP Science, AP Math. We could expand the number of electives available in engineering so kids get to take a pre-engineering course as part of a high school diploma. And we could also redesign how science, math, and engineering is taught in K-12. There's two problems with that. A quote minor problem is if you do the first two things, the students may not have time to take it all. There's already a lot of stuff they have to take. And the bigger problem is the amount of resources to do all those things
Yeah.
wouldn't get done in our lifetime.
Yeah.
So what is your advice as to where we might focus our
Well, I have my own opinions, and I mean, I think you have a real design challenge here. But I think first of teachers, and I'm not just saying that to this other thought at the end here, but I think that maybe you gather from what I've been saying that there's something different in engineering teaching than in science teaching, and what does that translate down to the pre-engineering level? I think it probably there would be a certain freedom in recognizing that. But then again, what do you do? What is this? I think, what are these? What are the things you should do with students? What should teachers know how to do? What should teachers know about engineering? So teacher preparation, workshops, I think is one thing. And then, then they go off and do their thing. Maybe that's where I would rate a high priority. I think you've inventory. I think one of your objectives is to find out what the hell's going on, and maybe you have some programs that are doing well. I've heard Gary mention some that maybe those can serve as models for replication. One thing I'm interested in is, are those programs only for the so-called good students? Is it necessary to be a good student to do engineering? I guess I come down on the following. You have to be good at math. I mean, the bottom line is mathematics in my mind. Or mathematics and logic. I think that's the bottom line. And I think once I was chairman of a committee at MIT where we had a relationship with Boston schools. This is in the wake of the busing, where they paired schools there was a magnet school in East Boston area of Vermont. And I was chairman of the faculty committee that was sort of had something to say about what was going on there. And I made a proposal to Paul Gray, the president at that time. So here's a program. I was familiar with Harvard Junior Fellows program. The Harvard Junior Fellows, Tom Kuhn was a Harvard Junior Fellow when he was a graduate student. Tom Kuhn wrote Structure of Scientific Revolutions, probably where he started writing. So Harvard has this elitist program for junior fellows, postdocs usually. Well, I would start an MIT Junior Fellows program for middle school students. And those that excelled in mathematics, I would go to a middle school and ask a teacher, who's your best student in mathematics? Black or white, whatever. And I would say, you're admitted to MIT. Right now, you're admitted to MIT. As whatever, just before they start turning off. When is that? 6, when they're 10 now? I don't know. It used to be about 14. I have a 10-year-old grandson. He's still. So, and I would say, make that, he may be good at sports too. He may be selling drugs, I don't know. But if he's good in math, make him an MIT Junior Fellow, admit him right there. Of course, all right, it's going to cost something. Yeah, okay, to make sure you stay in touch over the years. The program didn't fly. We can't alter our admission criteria like that. But, I think that's where things change, right? You've seen it in your own children. I mean, that middle school age is where I know it from my colleagues who went on to successful. I grew up in a posh suburban New York City, New Canaan, Connecticut, 63 students in the class. All the rich kids went to private school after, just before middle school, I think it was. But anyway, I went through public school. And but I remember my student peers who were very good at math and didn't go apply. It wasn't the thing to do. So there are, I think you have those kinds of programs of reaching down and getting at the student. Another thing, though, is it the best student? But this is a little too much off the wall. So maybe we should measure the quality of our teaching by how well we pull up the worst students. That would be something. As you can tell, I'm approaching retirement. And I'm through in another 2 minutes and the train leaves. Any other questions? Yeah.
And speaking of mathematics,
What mathematics?
yeah, which mathematics?
Yeah, that's a good question. Yeah.
And what are the processes, process design theory you're talking about? Which mathematics is compatible? How do you see that?
Well, I would say all of them probably, because I think engineers encounter logic, Boolean and otherwise. They encounter probabilistic in their thinking, maybe not precisely or theory-wise, but certainly they have to think probabilistically and accept arguments, that sort. And in their design, in ergonomics, I want to talk about ergonomists tonight and how they deal with statistics and aggregates. And I'm not sure I think the calculus is a bit overrated nowadays. Linear vector spaces. So there's some beautiful things that go on in mathematics, right? In terms of eigenvalue problems and vibration. I mean, the applied mathematics stuff is, but there you don't have to get into boundary layer theory, but there's still, the question is, how do you get at the really interesting stuff that's sort of basic here and bring it to these students at the middle school? First of all, you got to really know the math yourself. See, you've got to be a little bit adventurous, I think, in breaking away from the textbook. Or maybe you have a good textbook. Maybe it's there. I don't know. You had a question?
Oh, you had mentioned that you're optimistic that things are going to change.
Yeah.
And do you have any signposts that you could say that?
Yeah, well, I think things are, because of information technology, engineers have to recognize that you're not going to work in a cubicle and not be cognizant of who's doing what over in Asia or whatever, within a big corporation. I think there's got to be some recognition of increased recognition in the schools of this sort of global sensitivity that engineers have to have, as well as business people have. I think also the emphasis upon sustainability in design. That's now, where does that come from? It might come from within the engineering faculty themselves, I'm not sure, but in part it comes from regulation, of course, environmental concerns, industrial ecology but you don't hear that so much, you hear sustainability now, all right? But, these are changes that we've got to think differently, we've got to think downstream. Then there's the technology itself, and one of the examples I give tonight is Danfoss in Denmark. They make valves for refrigeration units and heating systems, and they make supermarket valves for refrigeration system for supermarket things, Well, now with information technology, they make controllers for the refrigeration unit, and they shape the control strategy to optimize the performance of that refrigeration unit on the site. So now they have people, but they data log, they take the data, you see, and they sort of are in league with the user to optimize the performance in real time, because they're data logging to compare them with other systems, that they have out in the field. This is driven by the technology, information technology. But what does it mean? It means that salesman that's selling Danfoss refrigeration valves, he's no longer selling just a valve. He's selling a system. He's selling energy conservation. And it seems if you're preparing an engineer, a mechanical engineer, that it seems that that's got to reflect back in engineering education. Another example like that I'll use tonight is Rolls-Royce. They sell hours of aircraft thrust. Caveat emptor, maybe that's no longer the case. So I think these things, do get back into the engineering education. And of course, information technology itself changes what we can do in a classroom. You can no longer just give a student and not expect them to use the web, with some people you might try that, But it's even more advantageous just to tell the student use the web, but just tell me what you're using there. I don't know. I don't have a coherent package of things to say, but I think change is so done. Of course, everything will go wrong. Everything will always go wrong, And engineers and scientists seek the truth, and engineering shit happens. No.
Well, getting back to your title, I have 5 daughters, and to date, none of them has pursued engineering, but I'd like them to.
Send them over to Denmark.
There's 2 left, yeah. But one of the issues is, if you focus on K-12, there's so much in ASWE and so many programs.
Yeah.
You mentioned several. You still have the challenge of if you have interested people's daughters that
Yeah.
want to become engineers, when they go off to college, you still have this apparatus, and someone mentioned it earlier, this inertia to overcome.
Sure.
And the system is such that there's not a lot of rewards, either you mentioned yourself in terms of tenure for someone who's wanting to focus on design and do these kinds of novel things. Because
Well,
the
that's-
system is set up to produce research and
Well, yeah, but there are things that are changing too, I think now. And it was part, NSF put in a lot of money trying into these coalitions. And one of the things that came out of that was, like the ASE journal is now a more respectable place. Not that I agree with the kinds of articles that publish there. I think they try to be too scientific. But there is an emphasis now on what is going on in the classroom, and so universities and MIT has an office, a learning lab kind of office, just as DTU has had. University of Washington has an excellent, has I think, in your faculty position there, in the School of Engineering, that looking at how can we better teach, how can we better motivate, how can we better retain. So there is change in that respect too. I'm not, but you're right. There's still real barriers.
You mentioned information technology and being more globally aware, and I'm wondering, is there demand in the market for this sort of different engineer? And if so, why isn't that kind of pulling our education systems to respond
Yeah.
to developing a different?
If I focus only on undergraduate, 3 or 4 year undergraduate program, my concern is not, I don't buy into those that worry too much about the market, where these people are going to end up, whether we're preparing them for the needs of industry. I think I want a better educated engineer. I want an engineer that's going to go out and be able to deal with this negotiation and know his stuff, know her stuff, but be able to deal with the complexity of contemporary engineering. I mean, for a while they may be stuck in a cubicle, but that's not going to last. If they're any good, they're not going to be lasting long. I want to prepare good engineers.
Can I
Yeah.
interject something there? Actually, Bruce and I were talking to the chancellor about some of this a month or two ago, and I was sort of pushing a little bit of this, and they're both going, we're thinking these same things are important and so forth. And he said, but don't the firms they want to hire the PEs, professional engineers. So first of all, I've done all the data on it. The number of PEs in Intel is like less than 1% of the engineers have a PE. So the idea is you have to be it. The other thing is that Larry and I are going to meet with a guy, Larry, I forget his last name, who's advanced project R&D design manager for Nike. And he's definitely on our wavelength, and he is not on the wavelength of the guys at in the university engineering programs. He's into design. He's creating design programs outside the university because he doesn't find the university responds to, in fact, his marketplace. If you want to know who's hiring design people who are really into design, I mean, Nike's a major deal. They have a huge design team and the whole thing about how they integrate all that stuff, and they're thinking exactly the way you're thinking. The marketplace, when you think about the marketplace, we tend to get dominated in the images of the high-tech stuff. I mean, engineering and design is very.
Let me say, there's another aspect to that is, as I say, I'm interested in undergraduate, so I'm as much interested in where they're coming from and why we can't get more into engineering, but not with the purpose, someone spoke about how you want pre-engineering, not just for the students that are going into engineering. Well, in a way, I say I want engineering programs, not just for engineers. I want undergraduate engineering programs that produce students, that develop, that students graduate that can do other things. In fact, if you look at the statistics, NSF did a study, they surveyed 2 million graduates of engineering schools. 1 million of them claimed, this was in 1995, they were no longer doing engineering. They were not doing engineering. Well, what are we doing then? I mean, what's all this about pipeline, preparing engineers for the needs of industry? What industry? Well, all right, many of them went back to management school, are still in industry. Still, I wonder why they say, they respond to a questionnaire, and they say, I'm no longer doing engineering. It's probably because they're no longer doing what their faculty told them was that what engineering was.
Right, exactly.
So they're probably still doing it. So that's my response. I don't look at the needs of industry. Yeah, I look at the needs of industry, but not in terms of what faculty think the needs of industry are. So 40%. There was one time at MIT when the undergraduates in engineering, I think 40% wanted to go to medical school. Of course, we now have bioengineering programs too. And then one of my best students became a patent attorney after being a project manager for Zoom Electronics. Became a project manager. He was a project leader for Zoom Electronics modem company, and then went to law school. No, I think that's great. I think that's great. You know. So that's. I think we want to look at where they come from. We want to get more in, right? Where they go afterwards.
Right, but I've heard the same thing from a lot of employers, that they want that breadth.
Yeah.
They don't want just the kind of single focus, they want the business experience.
Some of my thinking on this was triggered by a response by an industrial liaison committee that came to MIT. And, they came and they look at industry, university relations, and they sort of a fact sheet of 8 or 10 comments about the students. And one of the comments was, graduates not as good as before. I don't know what recall was. MIT graduates not as good as before. They think it's almost unethical to use the work of others. I think, well, makes sense. I don't like to use the work of, I admit it. I'm a preacher of that engineering science development. I don't like to use it. I want to know what I'm working with. I don't want to just take something off the shelf. But, you can't afford to do that these days, particularly when you got to get design done yesterday. You got to learn to use the work of others, to work with people, to understand the work of others, even though it may not be right in line, maybe cruder, maybe whatever. So, yeah.
I could teach kids that experimentation, and particularly failure, is a part of engineering development.
You mean their failure, or?
No. 99% of the designs don't work.
Well, I don't know whether they don't work. It's that they probably don't sell.
That's your open context.
Yeah.
So it's not just right or wrong. Where in open context, if you're sent around, the open context teaching has we're at Central Catholic. I was saying pushing the hospital card and getting the thing about this. And the kids are they're brainstorming all the time. Well, here's what I do, and what about this real thing? And you're gonna go around and pick it up. There's multiple solutions. That context is what you can do. It's not a question of the right or wrong answer. It's a question of many possible answers to this.
Yeah, I think that's it. You introduce open-ended exercises, and then you don't have to worry about failure or wrong or right. There is no right answer, maybe. That's not quite right. I mean, you can construct a right. Afterwards you find that this is the right answer. I think I have to quit because one last question.
So talking about loss from the pipeline, I teach sophomore engineering mechanics as well.
All right,
I
whereabouts?
think that's another place where we're leading from the pipeline is because calculus and physics and statics and it's built.
Right.
So I was wondering if you have some good examples.
Yeah, I do. You can see my website. I want to say finally, anyone buys my book, I'll sign it for free. But my book, the 5th chapter talks about some of this. But we meet afterwards. I can give you some clue on some things.
I want to thank Dr. Bucciarelli and all of you for being here. Well, feel free to mingle or speak out and go back to your day jobs. And Terry has tickets for